Greetings, brothers and sisters in Christ, and YouTube visitors. Welcome to another edition of Brother Carlton, I guess you might call it. Anyway, it's been a while since we've done a video. And what I want to talk to you about today, actually I'd like to read an article to you, a very excellent article by a professor at the University of San Bernardino called "Does Diversity Really Unite Us? Citizenship and Immigration." All right, there's a lot of talk about Trump's immigration policies. Let's see what this man has to say. His name is Edward J. Eirier, E-R-I-E-R. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Professor Emeritus of Political Science at California State University of San Bernardino. He earned his BA from San Jose University and his master's degree and PhD in government from the Claremont Graduate School. He's published numerous articles on constitutional topics in journals such as Interpretation, the Notre Dame Journal of Law, and the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy. He was a member of the California Advisory Commission on Civil Rights from 1988 to 2006 and served on the California Constitutional Revision Commission in 1996. He's the author of The American Polity and co-author of The Founders on Citizenship and Immigration. The following is adapted from a speech delivered on April 11th, 2018 at a Hillsdale College National Leadership Seminar in Colorado Springs. All right. President Trump's zero-tolerance policy for illegal border crossers has provoked a hysterical reaction from Democrats, established Republicans, the progressive liberal media, Hollywood radicals, and the deep state. What particularly motivated the ire of these Trump haters was the fact that the zero-tolerance policy would require the separation of parents and children at the border. The hysteria was, of course, completely insincere and fabricated, given that the policy of separating children and parents was nothing new. It had been a policy of the Obama and Bush administration as well. Furthermore, where is the compassion for the thousands of American children who are separated from their parents every year as a result of arrests and convictions for non-violent crimes? Many of those arrested are single mothers whose infants become wards of the government until their mothers complete their sentences. No hysteria or effusive compassion is elicited by these separations, confirming that the object of the hysteria surrounding illegal border crossers is to force open borders on the nation under the guise of compassion for children. Exactly. You got to see through the deception and the bias of the modern the liberal left media. CNN, MSNBC, and so on. The Washington Post. I just read a negative article today on Trump from the Washington Post. So there's a lot of the media that's liberally biased. I knew this back in 1987 when I was attending the University of Pacific. President Trump's preferred solution for ending the influx of illegal immigrants and providing border security is a wall. It is also the preferred solution of the American people. Zero tolerance is an interim policy that, if enforced, will help deter illegal crossers. The hysteria provoked by zero tolerance could have been predicted, but its magnitude and sheer insanity are almost breathtaking. Some prominent constitutional scholars have gone so far as to argue that the government has no constitutional authority to control the border, and this, which seems almost beyond hysteria, from the elite intellectual class that should be almost immune to hysteria. Well, doesn't Israel have walls and borders? Don't most nations have walls and borders? But somehow America's not supposed to have them. A very stupid idea. You see, you have to protect your nation, okay, from the undesirables, from illegals that might be coming in with diseases, that might be criminals, convicts, dangerous people, okay? We're not just supposed to allow them to come in here. And furthermore, you can't just allow anybody that comes into the country to live here if they're able to get on government aid. I mean, American citizens aren't here to support the rest of the world, people. You know that. It's common sense. We'd be bankrupt. Well, some people would say the United States is already bankrupt. But certainly, the deep state And the socialists and the communists that help run this country, they want a flood of illegals coming into the United States. Why? So that the deficit will go higher. So that we'll go deeper and deeper into debt until the whole system collapses. Okay? They don't want a balanced budget. And I'm not a Republican, by the way. I think there is a false left-right paradigm. The two parties are basically controlled by one large element. I'm more of a libertarian, if you're going to classify me as in a political sense. I believe in less government, and Republicans don't always advocate that. You know, the Republican Party seems to be wanting to spend more money on the war machine. You know, they're always financing bigger government for war and missiles and bombs and guns, whereas the Democrats tend to be more, and I mentioned this before in my videos, tend to be more on the domestic side. They're supposed to be more compassionate as opposed to the Republicans. They're supposed to be wanting to spend more for welfare and domestic spending and things like that, child support, food stamps, and so on. But regardless, both parties are dedicated to more spending, which is a bad thing because it leads to bigger government, less freedom, more control over the individual, and just a big fat bureaucracy, which is unproductive. Continuing the article. In the meantime, a federal district court judge in Southern California has discovered a substantive due process right guaranteeing the right to, quote, family integrity, unquote, lurking in the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment, and has ordered all children reunited with their illegal immigrant parents. Obviously, the judge expects the parents to be released from incarceration to join their children, but the Trump administration seems determined to keep parents and children together in detention centers until legal proceedings determine their fate. More than a century ago, the Supreme Court announced what was considered the settled sense of the matter when it remarked, quote, "It is an accepted maxim of international law and essential to self-preservation to forbid the entrance of foreigners within a sovereign nation's dominions, or to admit them only in such cases and upon such conditions as it may see fit to prescribe, unquote." This view was reaffirmed in the recent Supreme Court decision handed down on June 26th that upheld Trump's travel ban on foreign nationals from 8 countries, 6 of which have majority Muslim populations. Part of the complaint against the ban was that it violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment because Trump had displayed, quote, animus, A-N-I-M-U-S, animus, against Muslims in speeches before and after the 2016 election. The plaintiffs argued that the national security reasons for the ban were merely pretext for Trump's thinly disguised contempt for the Muslim religion. Although the court agreed that individual injury could be alleged under the Establishment Clause, the travel ban on its face was neutral with respect to religion, and it was therefore possible to decide the issue on statutory rather than constitutional grounds. The dissenting opinion in this case would have invalidated the ban on constitutional grounds, based on the idea that the president's campaign statements and those of his advisors proved that animus against Islam was the real and pervasive motivation for the travel ban. Had this dissenting opinion prevailed, it would have created an anomaly in constitutional jurisprudence, conceding that the plain language of the travel ban was neutral and therefore constitutional. What rendered the travel ban unconstitutional was Trump's purported display of animus in his public speeches. If signed by any president other than Trump, there would therefore be no constitutional objections. In other words, in their minds of the dissenters, psychoanalysis of Trump's motives held greater constitutional significance than the intent of the law expressed in its plain language. In any case, the majority opinion held that, quote, by its plain language, unquote, the Immigration and Naturalization Act, quote, grants the president broad discretion to suspend the entry of aliens into the United States. The president lawfully exercised that discretion based on his findings. That entry of the covered aliens would be detrimental to the national interest, unquote. Few limits have ever been placed on the president's broad authority to act under the Immigration and Naturalization Act, especially when national security and foreign relations are involved. In the 2016 presidential campaign, Donald Trump appealed to the importance of citizens and borders. In other words, Trump took his stand on behalf of the nation state and citizenship against the idea of a homogeneous world state populated by universal persons. In appealing directly to the people, Trump succeeded in defeating both political parties, the media, political professionals, pollsters, academics, and the bureaucratic class. All these groups form part of the bipartisan cartel that had represented the entrenched interests of the Washington establishment for many years. Although defeated in the election, the cartel has not given up. It is fighting a desperate battle to maintain its power. Historically, constitutional government has been found only in the nation state, where the people share a common good and are dedicated to the same principles and purposes. The homogeneous world state, the European Union on a global scale, will not be a constitutional democracy. It will be the administration of, quote, of universal personhood, unquote, without the inconvenience of having to rely on the consent of the governed. It will be government by unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats, much like the burgeoning administrative state that is today expanding its reach and magnifying its power in the United States. Quote, universal persons, unquote, will not be citizens. They will be clients or subjects. Rights will be superfluous because the collective welfare of the community, determined by the bureaucrats, will have superseded the rights of the individuals, plural, excuse me. Progressive liberalism no longer views self-preservation as a rational goal of the nation state. Rather, it insists that self-preservation and national security must be subordinate to openness and diversity. America's immigration policies, we are told, should demonstrate our commitment to diversity because an important part of the American character is openness. And our commitment to diversity is an affirmation of who we are as Americans. Yeah. Imagine diversity, even though it might mean the destruction of the unity of the faith and common values of a nation such as America. Now, isn't that pretty stupid and irrational to think that diversity should be supreme above unity? Yeah, there's diversity within the United States. There's diversity to some degree within every nation, but especially the United States. But less and less unity. And it's the unity that's going to keep us together, not the diversity. Get that through your brain. If this carries a risk to our security, it is a small price to pay. Indeed, the willing assumption of risk adds authenticity to our commitment. In support of all this, we are asked to believe something incredible, that the American character is defined only by its unlimited acceptance of diversity. A defined American character, devotion to Republican principles, Republican virtue, the habits and manners of free citizens, self-reliance, would, in that case, be impermissibly exclusive and thus impermissibly American. The homogeneous world state recognizes only openness, devotion to diversity, and acceptance as virtues, and must therefore condemn exclusivity as its greatest vice. It is the nation state that insists on exclusive citizenship and immigration policies that impose various kinds of restrictions. Yeah, you have to have restrictions. Every organization that wants to hold together has to have a set of values, code of conduct, whether it be a dress code. There's certain things about that group, that organization, that club, that help hold it together, okay? And there's a lot of people coming into America that just want to live off the system, mooch off the system, fly the flag of their own country, whether it be Mexico or some other country. They don't really give a hoot about America per se. As long as they can live here and enjoy that freedom and, live that lifestyle and maybe send some money back to their home country. And that's okay. I believe in competition. I believe that we should have the right to travel various places, but to do so legally. There are rules that have to be followed and obeyed. For example, there's nothing wrong with having a background check done on people coming into this country that want to live here, to make sure that they are, not guilty of a crime, to make sure that they're in good standing in their own country. But diversity is not our strength as much as unity. Now there has to be balance, as I said. But we are definitely setting ourselves up for division and the idea of divide and conquer. That's really the philosophy that's behind this, I believe, by the deep state, by the global elites, who want to divide Americans, whether it be the family, pitting the husband against the wife, blacks against whites, the rich against the poor, by wiping out the middle class, which is classic communism, by the way. That was one of the planks of Karl Marx. That, along with a progressive income tax, a central banking system, public or state schools, government schools, and a lot of other things that are already taking place, okay? So we're well on our way to communism, if you don't realize it. And our public schools are inundated with this philosophy of socialism or communism. Free enterprise is constantly berated and downplayed in importance, saying it doesn't work. Well, it does work if we just had it, but we don't have true free enterprise anymore. We have too much government regulations and restrictions, which keep the free market from operating effectively. But actually, capitalism has given the American people the greatest standard of living in all of history. It's a great system. It's not perfect. There's no perfect economic system, but it's certainly better than socialism, and it's more compatible with the New Testament principles under which Christ lived. All right, now, and that's subject to debate, of course, but that's what I believe. Now, continue with the article. Our progressive politicians and opinion leaders proclaim their commitment to diversity almost daily, chanting the same refrain: diversity is our strength. This is the gospel according to political correctness. But how does diversity strengthen us? Is it a force for unity and cohesiveness, or is it a source of division and contention? Does it promote the common good and the friendship that rests at the heart of citizenship? Or does it promote racial and ethnic division and something resembling the tribalism that prevents most of the world from making constitutional government a success? When is the last time we heard anyone in Washington talk about the common good? We are used to hearing talk about the various stakeholders and group interests, but not much about what the nation has in common. Yeah, as a side note, the common bond that held us together was the Christian faith. You had people coming here from England and some people from Mexico, or rather mostly from Spain. But it was the Roman Catholic faith and the Protestant faith. But it was the Christian faith. That's the important thing. It wasn't the Muslim faith. It wasn't the Jewish faith. That was a minority. It wasn't the Hindu faith. Okay. It was the Christian faith. And it was Christianity that gave us the Protestant work ethic, okay? And the idea that if a person doesn't work, neither should he eat. The principle that that if you steal, that you need to make restitution, that you should be punished. I imagine they had laws of capital punishment for, well, they may have had it for witchcraft or adultery. Certainly there's nothing wrong with that, but there's some people, libertarians, that might think that that's drastic. That's where I disagree with the libertarian philosophy. I mean, they say that, certain moral issues should not be prevented, but that's because they don't really view it from a biblical standpoint. All right, continuing. This should not be surprising. Greater diversity means inevitably that we have less in common, and the more we encourage diversity, the less we honor the common good. Any honest and clear-sighted observer should be able to see that diversity is a solvent that dissolves the unity and cohesiveness of a nation, and we should not be deceived into believing that its proponents do not understand the full impact of their advocacy. Diversity, of course, marches under the banner of tolerance, but is a bastion of intolerance. It enforces its ideological liberalism with an iron fist that is driven by political correctness, the most ingenious and insidious device for suppressing freedom of speech and political dissent ever invented. Political correctness could have been stopped